First of all, I want to thank Susan Henricks for pulling this group together, and to ICANN, which in my family, ICANN has always been synonymous with leadership. So when Susan reached out to me and asked me to speak, my mind went directly to what resonated to me about leadership. And so I quickly thought about the 5 preceding leaders in our 164-year-old company and what made them successful. So the first 2 leaders, NP1 and NP2, I never knew them, but I heard a lot of stories about them. And so I heard a lot of their accomplishments and some of the decisions they've made. The third leader, my grandfather, Phil, I did actually work with him just a little bit, and I also heard a ton of stories about his leadership. It's really Kate and Sandy Dodge, who I've probably worked with the longest, my mom and my dad. It was 27 years that I actually have been working with them. My dad, Sandy, is the president of the holding company and is now chairman of the board. And my mother, Kate, has started our company called NEI Global, which is our most profitable and our fastest growing company we have in the 6 companies that are the NP Dodge companies. When I analyzed all those leaders, I found that there are certain leadership traits that were timeless. What I have learned is that people will respond and want to work with people in companies that just don't say values, but they actually live them. Most of the people want to join a successful organization. So everyone in the room, please know you have to be profitable. The most important thing is to be profitable as a company. But right on the heels of that, people want to join a company that has 3 important traits. I think the company has to have a distinctive culture, it has to have an inclusive culture, and I also think that the business has to be an integral part of the community. First, let's talk about culture. My mom's company is a great example of a company. We want to create one of the best places to work, and we want a place where people want to join. NEI Global has won Best Places to Work awards. It's won international and national service awards. But what I hear time and time again is that people want to join that company because they are so welcomed in the company. And my mom credits creating that environment to a story that happened to my dad when he was in college. We were in the land development business at the time, and my grandpa and my dad were buying farms and subdividing them and selling lots. And what they would do during the week is they would be on bulldozers and they'd put roads in and cut in sewers. And then on weekends, they would sell lots, and they'd actually sell lots from that tent that you see right there. And that tent says NP Dodge Corporate Offices. So people would come in and they would talk about the lots with my grandfather and my dad. And at one point, a gentleman came in and talked to my dad and asked him a question that he couldn't answer. He turned to my grandfather and he said, "Hey, Dad, this guy has a question." My grandfather stiffened, and then he went and helped the gentleman. And then later on, he took my dad aside and he said, "Sandy, the customer is never a guy, he's a gentleman. And by the way, it's never a gal either, it's a lady. We are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen." My mom loves that story, first of all, in that day and age, for my grandpa to talk about men and women as customers, but then also to take my father aside and talk about elevating the workplace. My mom and my dad have tried to create a place where you elevate the work environment and you try to treat every transaction and every person with dignity. They also felt that if we have a service mentality and a Midwestern work ethic, when it comes to both clients and coworkers, we will be a compelling place to work and a compelling culture to join. The next trait is inclusivity, which isn't just about diversity in my mind. It's also, are we genuinely welcoming to all? Do we care about the people we work with? Our VP of HR loves to tell the story that when she first came to the NP Dodge company, she walked into the building and she passed someone who was pushing snow, and that person was wearing a suit and tie. And so she went and she had her first interview and it went well. And then she had the second interview with the president of the company that turned out to be the person who was pushing snow. And she asked him, who was my dad, she said, why were you pushing snow? And he said, well, when I came back from lunch, I saw it was slippery, and I don't want any of the people that I work with to get hurt on their way back into work. She decided then and there that that's the company that she wanted to join. But more than that, Susan uses that story so that she asks others in our organization, how can we create a welcoming environment? How can we go above and beyond and create a place where both customers and people want to be a part of? And how can we show them that we care? The final trait is community. People want to join companies that care about the community. When my grandfather returned home from World War II, he met another vet returning, a gentleman by the name of Whitney Young, who also ran the Urban League. The two of them became fast friends, and they both had a vision for Omaha, that Omaha needed to be a welcoming place for all. In the early 50s, when Whitney would hear of a restaurant that wouldn't serve people of color, he would call my grandfather, and he would tell my grandfather about it. My grandfather would quickly make a reservation at that restaurant, and the two of them, they'd say, would go to lunch. When they walked into the restaurant, if it seemed like it was an uncomfortable situation, my grandfather would kindly ask the gentleman to go into the kitchen so that he could still have his dignity. No one in our family knows what they talked about in the kitchen, and I'd like to think that my grandfather talked to him about doing the right thing. He possibly talked to him about, in Nebraska, we're kind to all. But I know when they came out, according to Whitney in his book, every restaurant that the two of them went to, they were served, and that they were continued to be served. And when we asked my grandfather about it, he said it was no big deal. It was just the right thing to do. I think people are drawn to companies that do the right thing and are like-minded. I also like to think that when you have the three components that we've just talked about, do you have the culture? Do you have inclusivity, and do you care about the community? I think that there is a higher possibility the company will not only act ethically, but it will also survive. So even though I work for a real estate company, and you'd think that I think about land and buildings, I actually think more about the people inside those buildings, and are we feeding the culture, are we welcoming to all, and are we integral to the community? That's the thing that I think we all need to work on every single day. Thanks.